The UN Security Council says it's gravely concerned by the worsening humanitarian situation in Mali. It's calling on all parties to allow aid organisations to help those in need. But how can aid agencies get to those suffering in a country effectively divided in two by recent fighting and where international sanctions imposed after last month's coup are beginning to bite? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. The UN Refugee Agency says it's deeply concerned by the deteriorating political and security situation in Mali, where thousands of people continue to flee their homes. Tuareg rebels are now in control of most of northern Mali, where they want to set up their own independent state. But there are also other armed groups in the area, some linked to Al-Qaeda, and there are reports of looting, attacks and rape. The UN World Food Programme says it's been forced to stop delivering aid to parts of northern Mali after its offices and warehouses were ransacked. In the capital, Bamako, economic sanctions imposed by neighbouring countries after the military coup on March the 22nd are beginning to bite. Hashim Al-Harbara reports.
Announcing the sale season, but convincing these women to buy shoes will require a miracle. People would rather save their money for the tough days yet to come. And it's not just shopkeepers who are suffering. Mariko runs this workshop that employs 10 people, but electricity rationing is severely affecting his business. Mariko says he and millions like him are being unfairly punished by the international sanctions.
If the situation doesn't change, our families will suffer a lot. I'm a father of 4 children. If I can't make money because of the power cut or the sanctions, that's not good for my family.
Without electricity, Mariko won't be able to finish these iron gates and fences on time, which will cost him hundreds of dollars a day. By the time he does eventually finish, delivering them could be difficult. In just a matter of days, people will start to feel the effect of a fuel shortage. There is no panic at petrol stations yet, but people are getting worried.
It's creating many problems for us. I am driving less. Yesterday I couldn't put gasoline into my car. Today I am lucky. Without a car you are crippled.
The vast majority of Malians run small businesses, living from day to day. If the money dries up, their companies will fail quickly. Mali's accounts in regional banks are frozen, the harshest measures ever imposed on a West African country.
People here still remember similar food and fuel crisis which led in the 90s to violence and chaos. Their main worry is that the impoverished, landlocked Mali won't be able to cope with international sanctions. Hashim Al-Harbara, Al Jazeera, Bamako.
So before we start our discussion and speak to our panel of experts, let's find out the latest from on the ground in northern Mali. And we're joined by one of the few reporters who's there on the ground, Fadel Abdul Razak from Al Jazeera. Fadel, you're currently, I believe, between Gao and Timbuktu in northern Mali. Give us first, you've been in Gao for the last few days. What's the situation right now there? How desperate is it?
The situation inside the town, Gao, and also in the Timbuktu is very difficult for the population because there is it's more dangerous because there is no security. Today, just right now, when I talk to you, I'm facing the Algerian Council. This is a place that they took like 5 people from Algeria. One of them, they say, is the Algerian Council in Gao. This is Jama'at al-Tawheed wal-Jihad. They took the people and now they made their flag as the place that the Algerian flag here.
So Fadel, explain to us who is exactly in control there right now.
At Gao, we can see people of MNLA. This is
the Tuareg rebels.
Tuareg rebellion. And also we can see Jamaat al-Tawheed wal-Jihad. This is people that they say they have the same program that Al-Qaeda. The boss of this group, they are inside the town of Gao, but in also Kidal, the situation is different.
OK, well, Fadl, what confuses us who are watching this from afar is the fact that we're seeing some reports which say, as you say, there are groups linked to Al-Qaeda and they've declared Sharia law, they're making women wear the veil and they are cutting off the hands of thieves. And then we see other reports that say there is vandalism, there is looting, there is rape of women. Describe for us which is the correct report.
Really, the report is coming like that, and you can see there is a lot of things coming from inside the home to the street, because some of military gunmen taking the think of people.
Fadl, just one last question before we join the rest of our panel of guests. I know you were in the hospital in Gao and you filmed some pictures there. Tell us what you saw in the hospital.
The hospital really is totally damaged, and it's not just because there is no equipment now in the hospital, but there is no staff also. There is no medicine, there is no anybody coming to the hospital. It's closed the door. The hospital is just, they have in Gao one hospital and now it's not working. If someone is health or something, have a problem for health or something like that, they can't find any doctor to help.
Fadl Abdul Razak, thank you very much. You paint a disturbing picture of what's going on there right now. So let's start our discussion. How can aid agencies get to those suffering in a country effectively divided in two, and what can neighbouring countries do about it? To help us answer these questions, we're joined by our guests in Geneva, Melissa Fleming, who's the head of communications and spokesperson for UNHCR. In London, Alessandra Giuffrida, an anthropologist at the School of Oriental and African Studies. And on the line from Botswana, we're joined by William Moseley. He's a professor of Geography and African Studies at Macalester College and a visiting scholar at the University of Botswana. Let's start with you, Melissa, in Geneva. The latest reports you're hearing from northern Mali, how worried are you?
Extremely worried. The situation for the people inside is dire, particularly because security has completely broken down. What we're hearing is that people are in a terrible state of fear, hiding in their homes, services non-existent, and mayhem in the streets, depending on where they are. Many people are continuing to flee. We're seeing 1,000 people a day fleeing to neighboring countries. Once they can get out of the country, they arrive in safety. The neighboring countries are being wonderful in keeping their borders open and being generous.
Alessandra, I know that you have spent a lot of time in northern Mali, living and studying with the Tuareg there. Tell us your reaction to the news that we've been hearing in recent days.
Well, I'm extremely worried. As you know, the north of the country is extremely dry, and any disorder due to either climatic hazards or conflict seriously endangers the lives of people. And its isolation also, as regards to tarmac roads, make it a very difficult area to access. I am therefore very, very concerned about the situation, and I'm confident, however, that negotiations are on the way between the movement of the national liberation of the Azawad, which is the secular Tuareg rebel movement, with the authorities, ECOWAS and others, to organize the delivery and distribution of aid, because they are now in control of the airports of Timbuktu, Gao and Amashash, which are the basis through which aid can be delivered. Therefore, I really hope that whatever the political situation turns out to be, the civilians who are on the ground are not going to be forgotten, and that there will be a solution very, very soon, and people will be able to receive aid.
Let's bring in William on the phone from Botswana now. William, in a minute we'll discuss exactly who's in control where in northern Mali. But first I'd like you to give us a little bit of background on northern Mali and the ethnic groups, exactly who lives there.
Yes, the dominant group in the northern part of the country are the Tuaregs, but you also have a significant group of Sonrai, who are traditionally rice farmers that live along the Niger River. The Tuaregs are pastoralists, and then you also have Fulani, who are agro-pastoralists. These groups in the past have peacefully coexisted. In more recent years, there's been more tension, in particular between the Tuareg and the Sonrai.
Melissa, I'd like, before we examine exactly what's going on right now on the ground, to get the background from you, because the whole region has been suffering, hasn't it, from drought and food shortages. The situation was bad before the current political crisis, yes?
Absolutely. A dire humanitarian situation due to the drought. Food insecurity actually led organizations like the World Food Program to have quite an operation in the north of Mali where the conflict is taking place. Now they've had to abandon that operation. So people who were already in a state of food insecurity are now being thrown into violence. And this is, of course, compounding the problem. In addition, the people who flee into the neighboring countries of Burkina Faso, of Mauritania, of Niger, these are also countries in the Sahel that are suffering from this drought. So our response, of course, is not only to provide protection and safety and shelter, but to make sure these people survive, including others in the host community, the drought and hunger.
Well, you painted a picture of the grim backdrop to the current crisis. As we hear about what's going on in northern Mali, there are persistent reports of Al-Qaeda influencing events in the area, and the situation's further complicated, as we've heard, by the impact of tribalism and various militias. Let's just run through them. The Tuaregs are fighting for their homeland in Azawad. After sweeping into several smaller towns in Mali, they're now in control of most of the north. They took control of Kidal. On Saturday, they captured Gao, the largest garrison town in the north, and a day later, rebels took control of the ancient city of Timbuktu. The rebels have organised themselves under the banner of the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, the MNLA, the movement founded last year by a fusion of rebel groups. Their numbers have been swollen by fighters returning with arms from the battlefields of Libya. The MNLA has also been heavily reinforced by Tuareg defectors from the regular Malian army. Another movement, Ansar Dine, has also claimed involvement in the rebel advance. The Salafist group has links to Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM. Its aim is to impose Islamic law in Mali. AQIM, numbering about 300 fighters in Mali, is currently holding 13 Western hostages. And there's another Al-Qaeda-related group, the Movement for Unity and Jihad in West Africa, which says it too took part in the fighting for Gao. Alessandra, a very confused picture. What sort of support from your time there did these Islamist groups have, do you think, among the ordinary population?
Well, I think they don't have much support at all. As far as I know, it's usually very, very vulnerable young men who might be recruited in terrorist groups. But as far as the MNLA is concerned, they have made several official announcements in the international media clarifying that they want to dissociate themselves completely from Ansar Dine and AQMI's actions. In fact, there was a very, very important announcement also being made this morning by the MNLA saying that they will cease any military actions, that they will stop east of Douentza, and therefore that they are the only people left in the north of Mali to help the distribution of aid to civilians. I think this is a very important point to remember because I also believe that the story about terrorist groups in the area has been somewhat inflated to serve particular political purposes. And I think this can only damage the lives of civilians who find themselves victims of atrocious violence as we speak, in addition to the food crisis and living in such harsh environment. I think it's very important to let the audiences know throughout the world that the MNLA has nothing to do with terrorism, and that their action is actually an action of defense and protection of civilians in the north of Mali, where they now can claim control and authority over that territory. The real problem I see now is what will happen once the international security councils will get together, when ECOWAS and the African Union and the International Security Council will get together to decide what to do. The last news I heard were that ECOWAS had sent 2,000 men in Mali to restore government order in the capital, and that after that they might consider attacking the north of the country. Now, I think that if this happens, this is a real tragedy which will further endanger the lives of civilians in that part of the world, and therefore that negotiations should start as soon as possible.
OK, well, let's get William's perspective on this. How do you think ECOWAS and other international bodies and regional bodies should deal with this situation when you have these different groups, and it seems there are different groups here with very different aims?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is we have a power vacuum in the southern part of the country. So I think the junta led by Amadou Sanogo needs to realize that the longer they remain in control, the more chaotic the situation is going to be. I think they need to step down. I think they need to briefly hand power back over to the president, the democratically elected president they've toppled, Amadou Touré. And then I think power should go to some sort of transitional government who would organize elections, but that transitional government, I think, as well, should resist attacking the North like was suggested and engage in negotiations with the MNLA. I'm sympathetic to the history of marginalization of the Tuareg population, but it's not entirely clear that all of the population up north, including many non-Tuareg, Sonra and Fulani, support the MNLA. So I think you need to organize a referendum where people get to express their views about whether they become independent, or you organize a situation where those areas have more autonomy.
Melissa, I'd like to ask you to bring it back to the humanitarian situation, please, and tell me where you're most worried and what groups you think are most at risk within the population.
Well, we have very little access. Just you have an Al Jazeera reporter in the north. There are no more humanitarians, hardly any. Most have been evacuated, and NGOs, UN organizations, offices have been looted. So our biggest concern is access in general to those populations. As you saw, the Security Council has called for humanitarian access. We are very concerned that people could be trapped and food will run out shortly, and there'll be what is very different over the last few days is that civilians, it seems, are being targeted. They may not be targeted directly by any one or the other of these groups, but there has been insecurity and mayhem that has erupted, that has where we have indications that girls are being raped, civilians are being killed, people are being armed, groups are robbing people as they flee, and this is a terrible situation for people to be in. Like to emphasize the countries, the neighboring countries, the host countries for the refugees have been extraordinarily generous. They have kept their borders open. They have provided land. They have, in some cases, actually provided food, even though they're struggling themselves. The government of Niger provided a month of food for a population of almost 50,000 refugees. So without that, that's pretty much the biggest gift any government of a neighboring country, of a country that is going through conflict, can give. So we're very, very grateful for that.
And of course, another very poor country. The crisis in Mali, of course, began in January when the government troops and the Tuareg rebels first started fighting. The military coup last month only made things worse. The UN says more than 200,000 people have been forced to leave their homes because of violence and political instability. According to the UN, some 113,000 Malians have fled across the borders. Of those, 46,000 went to Mauritania, 23,000 to Burkina Faso and 25,000 to Niger, while over 5,000 have fled to Algeria because of fighting. The UN estimates that up to 120,000 people have been displaced internally. Many are staying with relatives or friends in temporary settlements in and around the areas of conflict. Melissa, just tell me, you talked about those neighbouring countries and how helpful they've been, but is there a real risk that there could be problems there too, that they won't be able to cope with many more refugees?
Well, certainly they wouldn't be able to cope on their own, but they've been extremely helpful to us. So they've provided us, UNHCR and partners, with the space, the land, the security, the escorts, to enable us to build refugee camps very quickly, to deliver aid and shelter, and to deliver food. Without this, the people would starve, frankly. So it is an essential requirement. We've had to really gear up quickly. For example, in Niger, we only had a small office of 2 people, and now we're serving that massive population near the border with everything that they could possibly need. So we are anticipating, we have revised, due to this new level of violence and conflict, we've revised our contingency plans to an estimated over 150,000 people. What's very complex for us is, of course, they're fleeing to, as you mentioned, 4 countries. So we have had to, respond in operations in all those 4 countries. That said, all of that, once they cross the border, we can help them. What we're really concerned about right now are the people who are in the north of Mali, where all of this mayhem is taking place, and people are feeling incredibly at risk and insecure.
Alessandra, you know northern Mali well. For people like Melissa, for the UNHCR, for all those aid agencies that aren't able to operate there, how do they get back in? Who do they talk to? There's such chaos.
Well, I think well, I was actually on the phone to Mauritania this morning with an ex-Tuareg minister who served for the Malian government and has now defected to the MNLA. The MNLA has confirmed that they would be very willing to facilitate any humanitarian assistance in the north of Mali. They have the infrastructures, they can protect the dropping of aid or even of planes full of aid supplies in the airports, which are now under their control. And I think that would be a very welcome source of help at a time where people are dying. And I would therefore encourage even the International Red Cross to make contact with the spokesperson of the MNLA and find ways of reaching the local populations through the people who are most than willing in the MNLA to give provisions to people in need and defend them.
Well, we don't have the International Committee for the Red Cross here, but we do have Melissa from the UN. Are you going to try and get in touch? And how difficult it is trying to find someone to talk to, not just in the north, but in the south, in the capital, where you now have these young officers running things.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. I agree with Alessandra. I'm very confident that organizations like ICRC, this is what they do. Their role is to create humanitarian space. That is our role as well. No matter who is at fault, who is a perpetrator or not, our role is to help civilians, and I'm sure that they are taking actions on behalf of the international community. We're also seeing, just to note, that people are actually fleeing internally from the north to the south, and there will need to be a response helping these people. Many of the people who are fleeing, again, this is the second time they were fleeing. So there have been kind of 3 phases of this crisis, and this is the third and most intense phase. So you're seeing a lot of displacement, a lack of humanitarian access where there was significant humanitarian access, absolutely emergency efforts to try to regain that humanitarian access before things get even worse.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa. Thanks to our guests in Geneva, Melissa Fleming, in London, Alessandra Giuffrida, and on the line from Botswana, William Moseley. And most important, thanks to you for watching. Today we gave you the inside story on Mali, but what should we cover next time? Let us know. We want your ideas. All your comments, suggestions will be read by us here. Just send us a quick email. Our address is insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.